I'm going to present some evidence that has always fascinated me about the Book of Mormon. And after you have listened carefully, I'd like to have you comment down here if you either A, think this is irrefutable evidence of divine authenticity of the Book of Mormon, or B, if you do not agree that this is evidence of divine authenticity, please tell me what you do think this means. Hey everyone, Chad here again. It seems like every time someone brings up any sort of evidence or discovery or argument that supports the validity of the Book of Mormon, following closely on its heels is an explosive counter-argument aimed at discrediting one thing or another about either the Church or Joseph Smith or the Book of Mormon. While it is always a good idea to listen to both sides of a discussion of any polarizing topic, I have noticed that frequently opponents of the Book of Mormon carefully avoid discussing or debating the specific evidence presented and instead attack something else they feel more comfortable using as their target, erroneously asserting they have proved their point. This well-known debate tactic is what is called a straw man argument. An example of this kind of argumentative tactic I have experienced personally would be how, when I have shown evidence of differing writing styles found in the Book of Mormon, indicating that Joseph Smith could not have written it on his own, many of the comments I have had in opposition to my position are that Joseph Smith was a polygamist, so therefore the Book of Mormon has to be a hoax. Somehow the fact that Moses was a polygamist escapes their notice as they accept his writings in the Old Testament while discarding Joseph Smith's. Anyway, this straw man argument doesn't do anything to address the original evidence. So, in this video, I am issuing a challenge. I am throwing down the proverbial spiritual gauntlet. Shout out to my ironclad friend back there. I'm going to present some evidence that has always fascinated me about the Book of Mormon. And after you have listened carefully, I'd like to have you comment down here if you either A, think this is irrefutable evidence of divine authenticity of the Book of Mormon, or B, if you do not agree that this is evidence of divine authenticity, please tell me what you do think this means. Do not tell me that Mormons are a cult, or that we have a different Jesus, or that the 11 witnesses of the gold plate saw them with spiritual eyes, or that Joseph Smith was a treasure digger. I don't care about any of that. Every one of those, and so many more objections, are easily explained or refuted by evidence if anyone cares to listen to the other side. In fact, if you try to pull a straw man argument on me, I'll simply delete your comment. But you have my word that if you have a plausible or even an implausible explanation for what I present, I will leave it up. Seriously, if the Book of Mormon was fabricated by Joseph Smith as a hoax, it should be very easy to show exactly how what I am about to tell you was actually done. Here goes. There are several channels that have presented evidence of Lehi's journey from Jerusalem to the land of Bountiful, as is recorded in the Book of Mormon. The LDS scholar Hugh Nibley was one of the first to write about the following evidence in his 1988 book, Lehi in the Desert. I'll put up the relevant Book of Mormon references along with some maps and other images that describe how the journey taken by Lehi's family has been subsequently documented and verified. The challenge I am extending is to explain exactly how Joseph Smith could have possibly known all the information about Lehi's journey that has since been verified from his home in rural upstate New York in 1829. In approximately 600 BC, a prophet named Lehi leaves Jerusalem, taking his family with him. The Lord has warned him that Jerusalem will soon be destroyed and that he and his family are to travel to a promised land where they will be preserved, free from oppression, and able to worship as they choose. The route they followed, along with several landmarks along the way, are described in the book of 1 Nephi, chapters 2, verses 16 and 17. After leaving Jerusalem, we see in chapter 2, verses 5 and 6, "And he came down by the borders near the shore of the Red Sea. And it came to pass that when he had traveled 3 days in the wilderness, he pitched his tent in a valley by the side of a river of water. And when my father saw the waters of the river, he spake unto Laman, saying, O that thou mightest be like unto this river, continually flowing into the fountain of all righteousness. So, after leaving Jerusalem, Lehi's family heads toward the Red Sea, where they describe traveling along the border of the sea for 3 more days and then stop and camp in a valley from which a river flows continually into the Red Sea. Well, it just so happens that Wadi Tayyib al-Izm is a valley carved out of the granite rock mountains by a river that flows all year long, which is a rarity in this part of Saudi Arabia, and empties directly into the Red Sea. This valley is a 3 days journey from the northern tip of the Red Sea. When they left the valley of Lemuel, Nephi writes, "And it came to pass that we traveled for the space of 4 days, nearly a south-southeast direction. And we did pitch our tents again, and we did call the name of the place Shazer." Once again, Wadi Agar, also known as Wadi Sharma, located in the northern Hijaz Mountains, is a fertile valley with an oasis over 15 miles long and is approximately a 4-day journey from the proposed valley of Lemuel. Nephi continues, "And we did go forth again in the wilderness, following the same direction, keeping in the most fertile parts of the wilderness, which were in the borders near the Red Sea. And after we had traveled for the space of many days, we did pitch our tents for the space of a time, that we might again rest ourselves and obtain food for our families." Nephi says that near this next camp, he broke his bow and had to fashion another one of wood. Although we don't know the precise location of this stop, as he merely says it was many days of travel from Shazer, there is an area well south of Wadi Agar, along the border of the Red Sea, where a particular type of olive tree grows called the atim, or wild olive tree, that is ideal for crafting a bow. The next stop is probably the most interesting so far. "And it came to pass that we did again take our journey, traveling nearly the same course as in the beginning. And after we had traveled for the space of many days, we did pitch our tents again, that we might tarry for the space of a time. And it came to pass that Ishmael died, and was buried in the place which was called Nahom." Here we see some very interesting elements that critics have a very hard time explaining away. First of all, every other place Nephi discusses in which he uses a name, such as the Valley of Lemuel, the River Laman, Shazer, and the upcoming Bountiful and Iriantum, Nephi's wording is that they called the places whatever name is given. In Nahom, Nephi says the place which was called Nahom, indicating that it was an already named place. In the southern tip of what is now called the Saudi Peninsula, in roughly the area where Lehi's family would have had to turn eastward in order to arrive at their final destination, there is a very obscure area that can be seen on a few rare maps which were made in the 18th century by different explorers. This area is given the name of Nehem, or sometimes Nehhm. Interestingly, in most Near Eastern languages, only consonants are written. So, Nahom, Nahem, and Nehem would have been written exactly the same, Nhm. Well, the researchers who made the maps were able to date Nehem back to approximately the time of Christ. However, in 1997, German archaeologists discovered in the Nehem region 3 altars, each of which contained the inscription Nhm. The altars were found in what have been determined to be ancient burial grounds. They were also dated to approximately 600 to 700 BC, which puts Nehem in the right place at the right time for Lehi's family to find it. And Nahom was where Ishmael was buried. Remember, Joseph Smith, a farmer and day laborer, supposedly wrote the Book of Mormon in rural upstate New York and even more rural Pennsylvania. Nowhere near any libraries or universities where any maps of the Arabian Peninsula might have been located. And according to researchers, the majority of Near Eastern maps available in the early 1800s did not contain reference to Nehem or Nehem. The fact that it was an ancient burial ground was not known to Western society until the altars were discovered in 1997. An interesting thing that has recently been discovered is that if you were going to travel eastward across the desert, the only place it could be accomplished by foot travelers would be in Nahom, or Nem if you prefer. And eastward is exactly the direction Lehi's group turned next. And it came to pass that we did again take our journey in the wilderness, and we did travel nearly eastward from that time forth. And we did travel and wade through much affliction in the wilderness. After turning eastward, Lehi's family would certainly have waded through affliction, as the Rub al-Khali, or empty quarter, which they would cross, is the largest all-sand desert in the world. By traveling eastward from Nahom, Lehi's party would eventually reach the sea on the southeastern coast of the peninsula. In Joseph Smith's day, it was considered common knowledge that there was nothing but desert along the entire southeast coast of the Arabian Peninsula. In fact, for nearly 100 years after the Book of Mormon was published, Joseph Smith was ridiculed for including the place where Lehi's family finally hit the coast. They called it Bountiful. And we did come to the land which we called Bountiful because of its much fruit and also wild honey. Along with having a climate and apparently rainfall that would support fruit trees, Bountiful, according to Nephi's account in the Book of Mormon, also had mountains, cliffs that drop into the sea, trees that would allow the building of a large ship, metal ore for tools, flint for starting a fire, animals, and winds favorable for sailing towards the Western Hemisphere. Well, in the early 1900s, an English explorer by the name of Bertram Thomas discovered what he described as a lush and tropical section along the barren coast of the Arabian Peninsula, which happened to be in the area where Nephi's Bountiful should be located. Further exploration many years later revealed a tropical oasis called Khor Karfat, which lies at the end of a long, narrow ravine, providing the only access from the interior desert to the coast through the Kamar Mountains. At Khor Karfot, extensive exploration in the late 1980s led to discoveries of fruit trees, mountains, cliffs that drop into the sea, trees that would allow the building of a large ship, metal ore for tools, flint for starting a fire, animals, and seasonal winds favorable for sailing toward the Western Hemisphere. So now we arrive back to my original challenge. In my mind, sheer logic says there is only a single reason why an uneducated 1820s farm boy who knew no more about the geography, terrain, climate, and resources of the Arabian Peninsula than my 5-year-old grandson does, could have written a narrative with such incredibly specific and accurate detail after detail after detail. And that's that he didn't write it. It is literally impossible. I challenge anyone to provide a plausible explanation for any of this besides the actual explanation. And the only explanation that can account for such incredible and factual accuracy is that Joseph Smith was inspired and chosen to bring forth the Book of Mormon in the way he said he did. So, leave your comments down here and don't get distracted. Remember, if the Book of Mormon is true, then all the awful opinions about Joseph Smith's character put out by his detractors are just plain wrong. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in.